Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Psych Talk today. I'm going to be talking about something many of us can relate to dieting. How many of us have tried to diet at some point, and why is it so hard to stick to it? Please answer in the comments under the captions. This presentation dives into a fascinating study that explores the psychological factors at play in dieting and self control. The authors Hofmann, Adriaanse, Vohs, and Baumeister. I'm going to pronounce that with some confidence. Aim to understand the complex relationship between our eating habits, our self control, and the everyday environments where we make food choices. The title of this article, Dieting and the Self Control of Eating in Everyday Environments, an Experience Sampling Study, Basic and Applied Social Psychology. The researchers sought to understand how restrained and unrestrained eaters differ in their self regulation in these everyday food environments. To do this, they used a really interesting approach. First, they used what's called a four-component model of self-control. This model looks at desire, the conflict we feel about that desire, our attempts to resist it, and whether or not we actually act on it. Second, they employed an ecological momentary assessment, or an EMA. This is involved using smartphones to track participants' experience in real time as they went about their daily lives. Think about it as getting a snapshot of what people thought and felt as they encountered food, not just relying on their memory later. Finally, they also included a laboratory measure of inhibitory control, the Stroop task. This task measures how well people can resist distractions and control their impulses. They also assessed the participants' long term weight change. So, who are these participants? The study involved 204 individuals from Wurzburg, Germany. This included university students and employed people ranging in age from 18 to 55, and 66% were women. Now, let's get into the heart of the matter. The study revealed what the challenges of the dieting are. Contrary to what you might expect, the researchers found that dieters didn't actually experience more frequent or stronger food desires than non dieters. However, dieters did report feeling greater conflict about those desires. Imagine that feeling of wanting to eat something you're trying to avoid. That's what they measured. The study also showed that dieters were more likely to attempt self control, which makes sense. But here's the key: this didn't always translate into actually eating less. Trying to control yourself is one thing, successfully doing it is completely another. And perhaps more importantly, the researchers found that inhibitory control, the ability to resist impulses, played a significant role in weight loss. In other words, dieters in higher inhibitory control were more successful in their efforts. Like any research, the study had its strengths and weaknesses. The authors should be commented on several things. First, they used smartphones to capture real time data on participants' food desires and self control efforts in their daily lives. This really enhanced the ecological validity of the findings, meaning the results are more likely to reflect what happens in the real world. Second, they included a 4-month follow up, which allowed to examine the long term relationship between self control and weight change, which is pretty crucial. Third, they employed that lab-based measure, the Stroop task, to objectively assess inhibitory control. However, there were also some limitations. The study relied on self-report data, which can be just subject to bias. People might not always accurately report what they're feeling or doing. Also, the study categorized foods into broad good and bad categories, which might be a bit too simplistic and lacks nuance. Finally, it's important to remember that the study design cannot establish casual relationships. It can show us correlations, but it can't definitely say that one thing causes another, if you know what I mean. In conclusion, the study highlights the complex interplay between dieting, self control, and food desires in our everyday lives. The findings suggest that simply restricting food intake may not be enough for successful weight loss. Individuals also need strong inhibitory control, that ability to resist those tempting impulses. Thank you for listening.